The order of proceedings tonight. Firstly, I'm Kingsley. I'm the organiser, one of the organisers of the group, Design Thinking Meetup. We've had fabulous response. Thank you to all of you for the interest you've shown in this group. This is our third meetup. In the group itself, we have about 630 odd members across Sydney, mostly, and we've had about 150 odd folks signal their intention to come tonight. Obviously, it's a little bit less on the night, but we've had terrific trajectory from this group. The group is really for you. It's designed to promote design thinking, number one, across the community of people in that area. In order to get proceedings going, we've got 3 speakers tonight. What I thought I would do is, firstly, these events are really all around the sponsors who can put on an event like this. So thank you, firstly, to our regular host, iCentral.co by the Start Society. Ben up the back, if you wouldn't mind putting your hand up. Ben, yeah, Ben. We also have a wide range of other people involved in organising, and that's great. Always looking for more folks to help. So if you wouldn't mind, Zoe, put your hand up. Zoe's James. Lucas. And a few people who couldn't make it tonight. So that's, I guess, pretty simple. The order of proceedings is, the next step is I wanted to introduce... Sorry? Sponsored, yes, of course. The Charterhouse. Shoutout. Lovely Louise and Sam, come up, please. Just give you an opportunity to say a few words about your wonderful work.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I'm Louise. Yeah, we're from Charterhouse. I guess just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight. And thanks for having us in this lovely event tonight. I guess just as a quick introduction, we tonight specialize in obviously the recruitment space within digital. Yeah, just looking forward to kind of having a chat with you guys tonight and looking forward to hearing the speakers. And yeah, thanks again for coming out.
Yeah, please feel free to come and say hi at the end as well. Have a chat. It's great to get with me.
Thanks.
And this fishbowl here, very important. So the sponsorship, or everything that you've eaten tonight, all the beers, everything, that is thanks to Charterhouse. So thank you once more for making this a social occasion. And as part of that, if you are interested in leaving your business card at all, contact, do so here, because there will be a door prize. We'll call that at the end. Get someone to pull a card out of the fishbowl. I left all my business cards at home, but I've got plenty of other people's business cards. I'm not pretending to somebody else. Increase my chances of winning. Right now, I think your chances of winning are pretty high. They're only sitting about 15 cards. Some of which might be fine. So please take note of this. It'll be up the back. Thank you. And we'll get right to it. So 3 things tonight. It's all about design thinking. We're delighted to have Charterhouse involved because they're involved in recruiting in this area across the whole range of digital business. That's one of the reasons why I'm sure some people are here tonight. The other reason is to network and to learn from people who've had, a whole range of experiences in different design thinking oriented projects. So we've got 3 excellent speakers in that area. To start off, though, what I'm going to do is reverse slightly the order of the program. We're going to have, firstly, a brief segment with Lucas and Lee at the beginning, because Lie Ming, who'll be our last speaker, has actually got an app that he'd like to share with you. It's an interactive thing, and we hope we'll get some input from during the course of the proceedings. That'll only be a brief introduction. Go to that with Lucas in a minute. And then we'll launch straight into the speakers in the order that I mentioned. Anthony Quinn on design leadership, Ben Marr on conversion design, really interesting set of projects that Ben is working on that he can share with us, and then finally Lie Ming on his work in human-computer interaction in place at UTS. So Without further ado, let's throw to Lucas to introduce them.
I've had the pleasure of being lead through this meetup long enough, and so what we're actually going to try and ask everyone to do, so on these screens at the moment, not sure how well your photos or how one of the QR screens will go. There is a link there to look at, or to have a look. It's just an online website. So what we're asking everybody to do is just pay attention to the first two speakers. There will be some content that we'll ask questions about, and it'll be very much integrated into the speech. And it's all about gamification, how it works. I hope that we do the pass at the same time.
When you're prize or when you're prize? Or prize.
When you're prize.
So the typo.
So for anyone who can't read that, it's win.usid.com.
And you have to form a team. You have to form a team. And as many as you want. And you have to have a team name.
Depends on how many bottles people want to share the bottle of wine with.
Team name. Team name, guys. Team name.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So, invite Anthony to set up. If you want some more detail on any of these speakers tonight, do go to the website where we've got some full bios. I'm not going to give a long introduction. Anthony Quinn has got enormous experience, as you can see from that web-based bio, but he's really here tonight to talk about design leadership, which is a topic that's very deep and fascinating for any project of significance. So I'll let Anthony give us the good oil on design leadership. Here we go. Okay. Fantastic. Anthony Quinn.
Thanks. I'll try to get straight into it because I get so I've been working in design. We used to spend a lot of time talking about why. We still have those conversations. Can you guys hear it back? All right, I'll do my best. I've got a bit of a cold this evening, so I'll do my best to project as much as I can. So we used to have a lot of conversations about design, why you should use design, and we find now that less and less happening, that's less and less the case. And that's because we're now in a situation where we find that, generally speaking, design is recognized as something that is a means to achieving competitive differentiation in the marketplace. It's generally recognized as being something that drives and even helps sustain innovation, and they can solve pretty complex social problems. So in many respects, this is probably one of the best times ever that you could actually be involved in design. And I would certainly say, looking back over the term of my life in design, there has never been a better time to be in design. And I think anybody in the room who is in a situation where you're either one of two things. You're either looking for talent, so you're either looking for designers or design professionals to work with, and you'll know what demand is like trying to find somebody, or you're one of the looking for this team with first. Either way, there's proof right there. And I guess the thing is that we've moved on quite a lot as well, and so we'd probably say that we're not actually. I don't know what the cross section was like in the room, but maybe who in the room sort of works in what they might broadly describe as UX design. Okay, so that's quite a few people. So, we're, to you guys, you'll know it. You're not just UX designers anymore. We're now designers and we're design professionals that design things like products, design propositions, design businesses, we design education, we design healthcare, we design transport, we design government. So it really is very exciting time to be in this realm. But I guess the other thing is that as demand for design goes up, and as expectations for what we can do increase and go up, and as the scope of what we get to work with actually widens, the stakes are getting high and the expectations get higher and higher. And so it's really important, and we're often very good at reflecting on our design practices and the tools and the methods and techniques that we use. That's really, really important, how we do our research and our testing and our concepting and our prototyping and all those good things. But we also have to And it's really important that we do things like what we're doing now, and we start to actually think about, well, what does this mean for my design leadership practice? So that's what this talk is really all about. And what I'm going to do tonight is I'm actually going to share some life-changing moments. I'm just making sure this thing actually works. So I'm going to share with you some stories from my own experience. And what I'm going to do is basically that means all of the things in my life that I have essentially screwed up in a professional sense. And there are many because I've been doing it for a long time. And the things that I've learned from doing that, and I guess the principles, particularly that you can take away and apply in your own lives and in your own work practices, the tools and the methods that you use. And I guess, if I can sort of compress 25 years of learning down to about 35 minutes, then I feel like I've been a business for something. So what I'm about to share with you are things that literally did change my life. And I guess I'm saying that I hope that they're going to change yours in a positive way. So I caught up with a friend of mine recently for lunch, and he was telling me a story that was really, really interesting about a program that he was working on. And it's a pretty significant program in our organization, or the organization that we're in at the time. And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars investment, a couple of years to actually work this thing through. So not a trivial piece of work. And the team was very, very lucky to have a general manager who was quite pro-design. So very strong, very enthusiastic supporter of design, quite design savvy, and basically had gone to great lengths from the very start of this program to ensure that there was a good design team in place, they had a good working environment, they had all the resources they could possibly want, and basically ran interference all the way, which is not an easy thing to do in an organization, a large organization. And I guess the team was now at that point in time where they were very excited because they'd been through all this sort of problem of working out what exactly is the problem that we're here to solve and where we solve it for, and what are the many ways that we can solve it, and concepting and lab design and testing, and they finally now actually had a service, which is a real deal you could actually interact with like the customer would. And so they were about to bring in Marie, GM, and actually give her a demo and actually get some input as to where they were at. And like the team, Marie was also very excited because she'd been on exactly the same journey with them, and so it was sort of one of those high energy moments where everybody was going to get together and look at something and take it from there. And so they brought Marie in, they set her down in front of the computer, and they let her start to interact with the service in the way that you or I would interact with the service. And Marie, being the sort of open and forthright person that she was and wanted to basically answer the team's questions, started to give the team some feedback of where they were at. And she did that in a very honest, very open, very direct way, and told them exactly what she thought of things. And she told them what she thought about some of the copy and some of the visual design elements and some of the UX flows, and she even sort of maybe along the way picked up a few functional bugs that she thought they might want to know about too, because they'd obviously missed them. And then she left them 25 minutes to go for the next thing. We just left with given her GM, usually very busy person, got a lot to do and don't really have a lot of time to sort of spend talking about these in detail. And then the same thing happened a week later, and the same thing happened a week later after that. And it sort of kept happening. And then some other interesting things started to play out. So the team started to basically go to other started to go to other stakeholders. They went to other people to get advice, they went to other people to get guidance, and they went to other people to get direction. And so what that meant for Marie, weirdly, was that she was kind of beginning to lose sight of the program that she had stood up all those millions of dollars for, put herself and her career on the line for, and now was kind of losing track of where it was and what was going on and so on. But, things kept playing along the way they did. And then another interesting thing happened when the team actually called their design leader in and pretty much issued an ultimatum. So, this is kind of interesting because essentially what's happening now is the team's firing their leader. They're saying, well, think about this. Without Marie, we don't have a program. If we don't have a program, we don't have jobs, which is kind of weird, but that's how it is. It's then sort of reached that kind of nice incentive sort of flashpoint stage. And recognizing that this was probably not the most sustainable of circumstances, the design leader had to actually take this on and go and talk to Marie. And so she said, okay, but you're really important to us. We need you. We absolutely need your support. We need everything you've done for us. We really value what we're doing, and we will continue to need you. And you also probably need us because probably can't do this on your own. So we've got to work this out. And what we'll do, on our side from here on in is we probably recognize that when we've been inviting you in, We haven't necessarily been very clear about what it is that we want you to look at, where we're at, maybe what the boundaries are, and where we're maybe not quite complete yet, so you can steer away from them. And don't worry about the thoughts. We've got people that actually buy thoughts. So the other thing that we might ask is that of you, we would like you to actually use a slightly different technique. And so when you talk to us, what we'd actually like you to do is something along the lines of, this is really good, start with positive. So I see some good in this, or we've been making great progress, or, this piece here is a really good start. And you can challenge us, that's our job, right? So, how can we make it even better? Please do that. We need you to do that. But also emphasize the we in this, but it's not just us, but we've done something stupid on our bus to work together as a team, because maybe there's something that we need from you, but we never thought about it because you didn't ask us that way. So John Maxwell, who has written this great book called The 5 Levels of Leadership, I would recommend you read, talks about this, and he talks about how this concept of position is not enough. So your position basically in an organization chart, diagram of boxes, and your name might be in one and somebody else is in another. Your relative hierarchy does not actually really guarantee that you're a leader. It really is just an entry to the game. And so people can choose to either take that away from you or give it to you depending on how you actually relate to them. So I guess the principles, and I said earlier that I would share some principles that you might be able to take away from this and apply. The principles here really is that design leaders recognize and understand that people actually fundamentally want to be heard most of. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to agree with everything that everybody says, because if you do that, then you're probably not reliable in this person. That's not good. It just means that you've got to at least say something, play it back so that they understand it went in and now it's coming back out again. You can always have an argument or discussion about it. That's cool, but at least I know you were listening. And people actually want to feel like they're interested in something, and they want to feel like they're valued. They actually want to feel like that they're part of something that fundamentally is bigger than them on their own. And they want to understand roughly where they might fit into that, how they actually should play a part in it and actually continue to help to build things out. And I guess the question that you've got to ask as a design leader is, what does this mean for the people that I work with? And I don't necessarily mean, you've got a team, the people in my design team who report to me. I mean the people who you work with. It doesn't really matter whether you've got people. So the people who work in your functions and the people who work in the other functions that you need to collaborate with to actually get something done. And it also applies to the people who, if you're in an organization, might actually be further up in your design, permitted boss and so on, because to a certain degree, you have to lead them as well. What they have to do with learning. And I guess most importantly of all, as design leaders, we also have to think about this in terms of the people that we actually serve in design. So, whether they're customers or citizens, I guess the question you've always got to ask yourself is, am I enabling them to make the best contribution to reach their potential? Either in my process, or am I just whizzing through a process that I've learned, and I'm sort of ticking off boxes and saying, yes, I did research, yes, I did testing, and then I'm distinct. Are you actually getting some sort of deeper engagement with them? Are you actually thinking about the outcome, how they're involved with that, what the outcome actually means to them, what it might do to them, what are the consequences? So a few years ago, I was invited to be the design lead on Westpac Live, which is Westpac's internet banking platform. And at the time, it was personally, it was a big opportunity for me. So it's a big step up for me in terms of my career and an opportunity to learn and grow and develop. And before I continue, I would actually like to at least acknowledge that I recognize the irony of the situation that I'm in a room full of design thinkers and design leaders. I've got a slide that's got Comic Sans on it. Talking about design leadership. So, wasn't just a big opportunity for me, it was also a really significant opportunity for our customers, because we were basically replacing a 10-year-old home-rolled creaky old internet banking platform. Said that fact there. And giving them something that was much richer, much more robust, and a lot more functionality that basically would enable them to do a better job of managing their personal finances and their business finances. I guess that meant that for our business, it's an opportunity to have a deeper and longer relationship with our company. So it's a big deal. So one of the first things that I had to do was I had to engage with our program director, who was, I guess, who would describe things, the theme would describe him as a very, very experienced and really capable technology delivery guy. Had a very strong track record of delivering huge, complex, multi-million-dollar football sport. And he was a classic waterfall guy, like I mentioned. And so what I had to do was meet up with him and establish a relationship and start explaining to him about this thing called customer-centric design or human-centric design that we do and how it works. And so I caught up with him and I said, well, here's how it works. I have this diagram here and we'll talk through it and you're going to understand this in about 5 minutes. It was pretty simple. What we do is we basically bring 3 perspectives to bear on the situation. And the 3 perspectives are, we have a customer lens where we look at things and we understand the customer needs and their fears and all of those kinds of things. We bring that to bear on the problem. And we look at things from a business perspective and we get into, what's the business problem that we're trying to solve here and what's the opportunity and what's the, what makes this a viable proposition for the business. And we look at the constraints, we understand things like, we look at feasibility, we understand the constraints, be they time or budget, we understand the capabilities that we have technologically, but also in terms of the organizational capabilities and partnerships we have. And we put all of that together and we basically come up with an optimized design solution. And he looked at it and he went, oh, okay, but I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I just don't get it. Okay. So this is kind of an interesting start to the relationship, but first meeting, okay, leave it with me, maybe we can meet up again in a week's time and I'll try to come back with a different articulation. So, cool, that's fine, don't worry about it. So I left and I came back next week and I said, hey, how you doing? Really, really good. By the way, we've now got 200 people working the program, so it's really important that we understand each other and how we're going to work together. So let's see what we've got because we have to get some traction on this right now. We don't want to get this thing lost. And so I showed him this diagram and I said, well, okay, here's what we do. So what we do is we explore a problem space and we explore it very thoroughly and we sort of go wide. And once we believe we comprehensively understand the problem space, we start to narrow down and we use that clarity of what the problem is that we're actually solving as an input. We start generating concepts and prototyping, customer validation, techniques like that. Once we figure out which concept is the best fit for what we're trying to achieve here, we narrow down, we said that's it, and that's the definition. And he looked at it and he went, yeah, okay, this is it. Yep, and basically agrees on the points. And then he looked at it and said, sorry, I'm still not quite. I still don't get what it is. This is not so good now. I'm beginning to feel a little bit anxious about this, but this is fine. It's new information. I guess I'll just take it away and then we can get back together and I'll try this again. But okay, but look, you've got to really understand that time is money, clock's ticking. This is a pretty significant program. We're onboarding really rapidly. By the time you talk to me next week, we've got like 400 people on this floor. And so we really need to get this done. And look, I get that you guys worry about customer centricity. It's okay because you've got these requirements. And you told me previously, we had some conversations that, you did some customer research and it's in here in the requirements. So it's cool, right? We've got it covered anyway. But it's probably better that we understand each other. And so, let's just get on with this. We've got to get this moving. And so I came back to him a week or so later and I showed him this diagram. I said, well, this is the process. And we've got 3 phases: capture, create, deliver. So in the first phase of capture, what we do is we look in and we get the business perspective and what we're trying to do. Then we reach out to our customers, work with them, we call that looking out, we understand their perspective on things, we bring the two together, we synthesize those inputs, we get a clear set of requirements, and we start generating some concepts, prototype them, we go out to our customers again, and our business people, we test, we learn, and eventually we get a stable solution that we'll take and build. Maybe just a little bit of iteration in there, where you can do a pilot, a bit of iteration once we learn more, and then you can scale this thing and go out and implement it. And he looked at it, and he actually spent a good, pretty simple time, lifeless, but he probably spent a good 20 seconds just going. And I thought, it's engaging at last. And he turned around and he said to me, I think you and I are never going to understand. Okay, this is not great. I gotta go. 400 people, really busy. Sorry, I can't spend much more time on this. I might told him 5 minutes later, I walked in on the same floor, and I actually stood there for about 5 minutes. And all I could hear was a hum. That hum. Have you ever been in a place where everything is full on, and then the people are standing up, they're talking, they're sitting down, and all you can get is a hum of activity. And I really felt like this was big time. So I'm standing there watching this thing take off, And my great opportunity to make all these differences to our business, to our customers, my personal opportunity was just very cool. And so I went home and I was kind of walking around the house and finding at my desk. And I found this report that was one of those, who works in, just out of curiosity, who works in corporates here? Okay. So you may or may not know some. You do a lot of those kind of personality tests and Myers-Briggs and all various. So I picked one up and I found this. And actually, it was one of those, as my 5-year-old son would say, it was like, ding, I needed that moments. I know it's hard to read from the back, and I'm not going to try and read it all out, but essentially what this is, it's called the Team Management Profile, or the TMP. If you work in an organization, you have to have an acronym. And essentially what it describes is work style preferences. So it's not about your skills, your hard skills, your soft skills. It's just the kind of work that you like doing, how you like doing, right? And essentially what it said roughly is that they're, without reading every single segment of the pie, or the cheese wheel as we started to call it, it says that there are 4 sort of broad work style preferences. There are people who are explorers and they like to open them. They're all getting in there, what's the idea, what can I learn about this space, and what's the vision, and I can see how I can go from there to there really quickly. And there are people who are really good at organizing stuff, so they can take lots and lots of information and data, and they can press it down, make it really simple and easy for somebody like myself to understand. Or they can take a lot of people who might be really chaotic and actually organize and put structure into them so that they can actually work effectively. And then you've got another type of person, finisher or excluder. They're all about certainty and closing things down and get it done and get it over the line. And then you've got the type of person or type of work style who, he's all about consistency and so that they can get things to happen the same way over and over again. And so if you've got those basic 4 different types covered, and you've got the linker, which is the great dot in the middle, pulling them all together, you've actually got the effective team. Because, from goal forward, you've got to either do something, figure out an opportunity, do it, understand it, close it down, get it done, and keep doing it consistently. And the insight that I had was that I'm what's known as a creator innovator. So basically, I'm an explorer. I live in the top corner of that circle, which is why I can say things like corner of the circle. And D lives in the bottom right. So he's a concluder with a little bit of control in. What that means is we're diametrically opposed in terms of our work style preferences and probably our communication styles as well. And so I'm showing up these to him, woolly abstract kind of like big drawings, right? I can see, this is this and it connects to that, and it's easy, right? And he's going, but I'm just not, which is not his fault, right? It's actually mine for not spotting. So the insight I had was I had to step into the circle in the middle and be the linker, get out of my box and wait, whatever. And so be the linker. And basically what I did was I then was able to hire 2 people. So I hired my own organizer, so somebody who can actually take my really thoughts and diagrams, concepts, all the background stuff, and turn it into something that's simple and meaningful. And my own computer producer, so someone who can actually relate to him and speaking the language, but also test me. When I did that, we were able to actually then get across the basic answer to the question, which was really turned out to be really very simple. All he was actually asking was, it's kind of embarrassing. What are your inputs and what are your outputs? And how do I plug them into my stuff? Very simple, sort of network world. But I wasn't hearing that because, and so once we were able to answer that question, we got back in the program, being ready, off we went. It's fantastic pose. Quite a learning. I guess that the principle at play here is that designers cultivate diversity. And basically it's all about the people that you work with. So it's not just about people with different skills, that's very important, but it's also about people who have different work style preferences. So have them in your real team or your virtual team, doesn't really matter, but have them available to you. Proactively go out and get yourself mentors and advisors who are from outside the design function as well, because that's how you kind of sometimes get themselves. And essentially, the strand here is that it's all about broadening the worldview. The broader your worldview, broader your frame of reference from actually put you back against the wall. So I'll expand something to it. In a similar vein, and this is a lot more recently, different piece of work. We were working on a project, it's quite a short one, it was only 12 weeks long. And essentially what we were doing was we were designing the business case. So we were using design thinking and design, human-centered design techniques to actually design a business case for a service proposition we had. We were trying to drop down the the money basically to support to get this thing off the ground and get it going. And we, you know, it was a great project. We were going really, really well. Start 12 weeks. We're about 8 weeks into it. We've been through things like, you know, the research and a lot of framing. We've done some collaborative design with our customers and some stakeholders. We've been prototyping and testing the prototypes, and we're getting really strong signals from our customers that we're on something. We were presenting all of this to, we were in our regular stand-ups to one of our key sponsors. And he was just gushing very sort of guys, this is fantastic. I love the thinking. I love the customer-centric methodology. I can see how you're building this case from the ground up, based on the customer needs. It is absolutely awesome. It's fantastic work. And I have absolutely no confidence in this. I'm standing up front of the board and asking them for the millions of dollars that's going to take to build this thing. But he went on to elaborate. It's like, why? So, well, the reason is I can see a lot of intent here, but I don't see any actual action. So what he meant was basically, and he sort of delivered a challenge to us and said, what I need you to do is I need you to prove to me that you can get customers. That's what I want. But if you get customers, I can get a business case. And then he walked out of the room and he left us to sort of ponder. Designers, and we're looking at each other and we're going, okay, new information, okay. It's kind of interesting, you know, when you're going, okay, I know I've just been told something is really important, but how the hell? And so we're going, okay, so we kind of know by now that this thing takes, let's just say round figures about $10 million to build. We've got, I don't know, I've got dollars then, it's something like, I'm not getting my lunch money. So, you know, we're kind of going, okay, well, we haven't got that kind of resource left. We've got 4 weeks, and this thing's going to take 2 years, and we're kind of a bit lacking at the moment. We're some sport designers, it's a heavy lifting architectural, and we're then going stuff, right? So we're probably not going to get there. So how are we going to do this? Now, we're quite fortunate in our team, and we do have some people who have some starters experience. We were talking to them about this interesting situation that we found ourselves in, and one of the guys said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you try building a landing page, right? And so we were like, well, what do you mean landing page? And we were like, well, okay, so startup technique, you build a landing page, you basically describe a new service, and you pull in some of the features from your prototypes, and maybe you can pull in some of the, you know, customer testimonials from the testing, sanitize them obviously, and don't brand it because it's probably bad move to signal to the market what the company's intent is here. And you'll probably all get fired for releasing, you know, confidential IP out into the internet. That's generally kind of, it's not a dumb thing, I think. And, you know, stand up some Facebook ads and drive traffic to it and collect some email addresses, because that's kind of a form of currency, right? So at least you can say, well, look, people signed up. And so that's what we did. We spent the next 4 weeks, it took us a little while to get going, but we spent the next 4 weeks and we got progressively faster and faster, iterating our ads, our landing page, and at the end of the 4 weeks, we regrouped again and we presented our findings. We didn't get as many email signups as we would have liked, but we had a few. But probably the best thing about using that technique was we got really, really good at articulating our core value proposition. Really, really critical. And that was the thing that actually got our sponsor over the line, because it sort of went, wow, this is pretty cool, right? Now I actually can sell this thing, and at least I can take it forward. That's why I got it in the next page. So again, didn't ask for $10 million. It's more like we clearly see the next stage is to do some form of pilot, so let's get that stood off. So that's what happened next. And so I guess the insight here is that, you know, in this world for us outside of our traditional DX and CCB methods of working, there's this thing called a startup, and really it's just another bunch of tools you can actually do things. And so building on this team of diversity, this is something that design leaders do. They actually go out and proactively try out new work methods, and they bring them in. And they don't do it in an academic kind of, I read about this and sounds cool sense. They actually take the risk on it, but I don't know will work, because ultimately all learning is personal, right? All knowledge is personal. You get it from experience. Example, one might try it out. I was invited to meet with our CEO a little while back, and it was kind of cool because I don't really get to spend a lot of time with the CEO. It's a big organization, and it's sort of a really good opportunity to actually share with him some of the work that we've been doing, some of our thinking, and maybe we can ask him for some help with some things that we need to resolve. And I was, you know, I have to admit, I was a little bit nervous because generally I don't spend a lot of time with the CEO. But it was an informal meeting, coming to my office, we'll have a coffee. And that's what we did. We sat down with a couple of chairs, and he basically said, okay, so what have we got for the next thing? Let's go. and I started to talk, but you know, I was a little bit nervous, so I thought I'm just gonna have some coffee just to, you know, I think to settle my nerves. So I reached for my coffee cup. So this and you know, that's not my arm, but you know, I better get it under control. But the next 15 seconds, all I can sort of hear is, you know, that. And he's looking at me, and you know, I'm now thinking that he now knows I'm nervous. This is great. I spill my coffee. At least I didn't spill it on him, but spilling a little bit of coffee, and I get going and start showing my laptop and talking, and telling about the project, and telling about all the stuff we're doing. This project, and we did this thing with customers, we learned this thing, and we got this insight, so we did this, and we did that, and we did this other thing. Before I know it, I feel my chest is getting tired, my voice is going up and up and up and up and up. Like this. I'm suddenly aware that my shoulders have been moved in my ears. He's looking at me, and I know he knows, and now I'm getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And eventually, after about 10 minutes, I'll walk out of the room with a to-do list of the CEO, which generally you have to pay attention to. That is as long as my arm. Well, it's not true. And I'm completely thinking, wow, well, I've completely wasted his time because essentially he stopped the music, just did a bunch of stuff. And I completely wasted my time. And I've got to go back to tell the team that, you know, this big opportunity that we thought we had, actually, I can't do it. And off I went. Yeah, fantastic. And I guess, you know, what was kind of happening there a little bit was, yeah, so I was a bit anxious about being to see well, right? That's just how it is. But I'd read some feedback from one of our pilots that morning. And, you know, this was kind of maybe in my mind at the time. And I'm sort of thinking, okay, you know, and admittedly, there was some other feedback that I've read, but for some weird reason, I can't think what it was. You know, and all play close loop in my brain. And I'm thinking that at any point in this conversation, what he's going to do is he's going to close my laptop very gently. He's going to look over the top of it. He's going to say, you know, you have just been found out. And we're on to you. And I'm thinking, for all I know, he's the guy that. Now he didn't do that, but it sort of didn't matter because the loop was playing around and around. It's some interesting things started to happen then. I can explain this with hindsight, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Essentially, what's happened was that incident behavior of three things, ABC. So the incident or the trigger was that I read the feedback and I was a little bit nervous about being the CEO. And I guess then the behavior that kicked off was that the little loop that was going on in my head of the providing feedback, and then you being found out and you're a failure off you. Set up sort of the secondary behavior after that, which was that I kind of then started avoiding meetings with my senior stakeholders, which is generally not a good thing to do in my position, because most of what I actually do is not, I'm not really doing myself in a common sense. I'm not hands-on that much anymore, and so a lot of what I do is talk to people and get stuff to happen. So it's kind of not a good look when you're being it makes it hard to get stuff to happen. I'm not a voice behind the brains. So and I guess the consequence was very simple. My visibility was going down, my profile was going down, and my income was going down. It's a fairly simple recipe. If you're not in a room when someone asks a question, then somebody else will provide the answer. And it may not be the best, but it's better than not. Right? So the reason that I now know this is that I obviously couldn't let this keep going, and I came across this great book. It's called Self-Directed Behavior, and it describes that sort of model. And I can talk about this book for 45 minutes. It's quite dense. It's actually an academic course book. It's got a lot of theory in it. It's got a lot of examples and a lot of case studies. However, what's kind of interesting about it is that you learn it by doing it. And so it's also got some techniques and program techniques. And essentially, what sort of boils down to, and I'm not doing it justice like simplifying the slide, is it's all about conscious, observation and experimentation on himself in a kind of good way. And what you're essentially doing is you're kind of practicing design thinking and design methodology in yourself. So you're doing research in yourself, and you're actually gathering facts that what you're doing. So as you're going about your day, you use a notebook or your diary, it doesn't really matter. Probably don't use your phone. affecting all the time. And essentially what you do is you say, I'm here, what I'm doing right now, I'm talking to you guys, whatever. What am I thinking? I'm probably thinking about, what my next point is, making sure I move off of that. And, what am I feeling? Which is, I'm a great time, by the way. I hope you're too. But it's, as I go about my day, I'm just, taking those snapshots, and it doesn't really matter what to focus on, you just do it. And then you gather a lot of data, and you can now analyze that data and figure out, hey, some interesting things happening here. Like beginning to see why some of these triggers are setting off some of these behaviors. And you can start to make changes. So you can either change you change the antecedent, so you can say, hey, I'll take myself out of the situation. Or I'll engineer the situation so I'm more comfortable with it. Or you can change behavior. So it'll be different consequences. You can play around with consequences a little bit to see if they draw you towards the behavior. That's essentially what you do. And so in my situation, what I did was recognizing that I was maybe feeling a little bit anxious about informal meetings and that they were high stakes to me, I kind of engineered a different style of meeting. So what I started to do was have informal meetings, and I would kind of intercept. It sounds kind of like I would kind of intercept people in the corridor, knowing where they'd be roughly at a point in time. I'd sort of spring out. But I'd sort of intercept them. I'm in the corridor. And the beauty of it was for me is that because they weren't expecting a meeting necessarily, I could back out of it and it wasn't working. So small talk to one day, that's exactly what I did. I went to a film director, didn't go. And he was in the coffee shop, and I sort of looked in the queue, and I started telling the story. The story that I told him about was a program director, similar to himself. And so it's like, hey, gentleman friend of mine, the program director. He was telling me about how, they've got this awesome, just done this incredible redesign of one of their products. They've run into some pretty interesting issues though. They just migrated all their customers on it. They've pretty much moved up. And what happened was the call centers just literally fell over because they got something called, hey, is this real or is this Samsung? And the other things on the call were, hey, this is just different, right? I like it, but I'm trying to do my business, blah, 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 and I can't quite figure out if it's different. I've been giving out for 20 years, and now you changed it, and you saw me through it. And so the call centers literally could not cope with the problem, and they started to fall over. And so they pulled people out of the business to work in the call centers, which is kind of what to do and so on and so on. And the problem with that is that, your service quality is going down, but now your sales are going down as well. And so they also had to back it up by putting people out of the project and get them off the phone. So the problem with that now is that the project's running tight. And that's not a good look for a program director. So, you kind of get away with any one of those things, but when you've got three of them happening, you do tend to attract all kinds of interesting internal political attention. And so I'm telling him the story. And, he's feeling his phone in the beginning, and then it felt in his pocket and was kind of leaning in and was saying, and when he said, hey, you're trying to tell me that, would we have to be by any chance in the same situation? Well, maybe a little bit. But it's okay. So what we can do is, we can use something called service design. We can design and change the migration journey. Carefully design the fault itself, right? And we'll set it up in such a way that, my problem with my team is we've got the budget to do it, but if you can find the funds, I'll take care of that. I'll get it happen. And I'll set it up in such a way you have complete visibility over what's going on. And I'll follow you in it the whole way. You can manage the messaging outwards into your organization. But maybe something's in here to change it. So he said, fine, I'll start out the cash, just go through it, get it running. We did. And the good thing was that we migrated 4.5 million customers. Now, we still had problems with, some of them had a bumpier journey than they should have, because it's kind of hard to get it right every time with 4.5 million people. But we were actually way ahead of plan in terms of the impact of this step with the call centers. We've actually had less impact on the call center and support teams than it was actually anticipated. Because that generally had conflicts. And along the way, the time was actually really nice. So I guess, that's a great story, but, one of the principles that are at play here, it's all about something that design leaders do is they actually practice self-awareness, I guess, or like I said, practice design thinking on yourself. And so it's really important that you consciously get into your own behaviors. You've got to ask yourself and measure these things all the time. You ask yourself a lot of questions like, You know, what are my triggers? First of all, what are my behaviors? Because kind of like not always aware. But what else are my triggers? What's driving that behavior? What are the assumptions that I've got, the beliefs that I have? You've got to ask the question: are they empowering me? Are they opening me up? Or are they maybe limiting me and shutting me down? And very importantly, are they valid? You know, if I got all these assumptions about all these things that I can't do or won't do, but they're just things that I think. And so, what are the little tiny experiments that I could safely run, see whether they're valid or not? That might edge me closer towards, I'm a little bit more confident now. I'm a little bit more, oh, cool, this is happening. And I guess, as I say, it's the, once you've got that insight, then how might I apply that design thinking that we all have the ability to do and come up with these creative ways to re-engineer the situation so we can kind of move forward with it. When I was telling the program director the story, it wasn't just telling the story. I was actually manipulating the body chemistry and the brain chemistry. And what I was essentially doing was, if I break it down, just replay it really quickly. When I told him about that other program director and that parallel universe, he could empathize with because it's sort of quite easy to relate to. I got his attention when I think about that problem. I basically introduced conflict into his life. And even when you hear a story, you basically live the experience of protagonists. So he's reliving that guy's experience in the moment. That's really great. And essentially what happens is when I introduced that conflict and got his attention and put his phone away, his body released a shot of cortisol, which is one of the fight or flight hormones, right? So when that happens, I'm very good to get someone's attention. And it's a big, like, if you think about here, you try and cross the screen, here, and stuff like that. And that's exactly what happens here. They go wide-eyed and they look at you and you got their attention. And when I told them about all the horrible things that were happening, I basically took them to hell, which is not a nice place to be. So I'm told. And when I actually introduced the service design method as a way of resolving the conflict, then he started to relax a little bit, and his body's releasing dopamine, which actually introduces feelings of optimism. He's feeling a bit more optimistic about the future now. When I went that next step and I started to talk about how he was have some control and visibility over what we were doing and some input and influence over it, he started to feel like a little bit more trustworthy. He basically become more trustable to me and of a solution. He had that input. So he thought he was releasing oxytocin, which actually makes us feel more trustable. Watch out for that when people are telling the stories. The other thing that I did was I used this technique called the golden circle from a guy called Simon. It's a great thing. I recommend you read the book. It's a lot more than just comes to it. But essentially, I architected the story around, I started with purpose, which is why. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that he didn't have a customer-centric purpose, otherwise he wouldn't be motivated. But his why was all about getting the timelines, the migration, that was his immediate focus. So that was his purpose right there and then. So I just overlaid my story in that purpose. And then I told him about the how, which is, this is how this is going to play out, which is the service design thing, and it wasn't the output, the outcome, and how he's going to So it's the why, the how, the what. It's a great framework to be very often. To get it, we tend to talk about what's my output here, or how. We can't lose people by the time we've got to, and why begins the first place. So we've covered quite a bit of ground, probably in about half an hour thereabouts, but I guess you put this out, it's 4 or 5 sort of overarching play here. So to summarize, I guess, and say this: when it comes to stories, design leaders tell stories to basically influence outside design function, and they tell stories to reinforce culture, and that's really key. You've got to be really mindful of the story you tell. So everybody loves awards. Everybody loves telling about, last week we were doing this thing and we had this, got into this, there was adversity, right? So we got this thing, but great adversity, we overcame it. Very often we're actually saying is, last week I was with this person and we were having an argument and I won. And you've got to think about what, you might not intend it, but what's your story actually saying to someone who just got to know you or is joining the team? You're basically saying this kind of stuff is acceptable around that. And also, you can be very mindful of, you wouldn't be surprised at the opportunities that you have to tell stories that you might miss. So a really simple example is, how many meetings do you go to where nothing kind of happens in the first 5 minutes because you're waiting for someone? and everybody's just chatting their weather and stuff, and nobody's really listening, they're just doing it. That's a really good opportunity to get in quickly with a simple story, but actually achieves an outcome. You want to do that, or influences, or finds an idea. And the thing to remember here is that when you tell stories that actually have an, that people connect with, that, all that stuff I showed you about the body chemistry, that can last up to 5 days. It's a powerful enough story. It's not pretty significant. So you can keep hitting somebody with the same story or a varying dog every 5 days, and it's the emotional connection and the overlap in purpose is strong enough. Then over time you're basically going to achieve change, and you will also inspire them to retell your story. So they'll tell 5 people, before you know it, change the world with just stories. So be very mindful of that. But for that to happen, you've got to have that emotional connection. You've got to have clarity and purpose. If you don't, it's just so. I guess it's quite a breadth here. We've talked about quite a lot. It's probably 4 principles that I'd sort of just summarize really quickly. So one is that the design leaders are all about creating environments where people can basically make their fullest potential, or they can reach their fullest potential to make a meaningful competition. That's kind of it's almost your first job as a design leader. Design leaders, they basically cultivate diversity. So in terms of the people they work with, the people that they have as advisors, the tools and their methods and their work practices, they're all actively cultivating diversity and broadening the work. Somebody once said to me, I don't really have a favorite band, I just like music. It's that kind of thing. Because the broader you view, the more resourceful you are making help solve. And design leaders practice this sort of active, conscious, intentional self-awareness, sort of design thinking of yourself. I think about it like that. Design leaders tell stories very consciously with intent to shape and influence culture. But there is one of the things that design leaders do, and I guess they basically make a decision. The decision isn't necessarily, I don't wake up and want to go, hey, I'm going to be a leader today. The decision is pretty much when things are a little bit fuzzy or a bit unsure, or nobody really seems to know quite what to do, I'll probably just take the first step. And I'll do that, and then some people go along with me, and then I'll take another step and another step, and so on. But consciously or otherwise, do actually make that decision. So, I guess I didn't tell you at the beginning of the presentation that I was going to share with you life is. I guess if you ask me, one of the things that I suppose I've realised in my career is that life is a process. It's a journey, and it might sound a bit cliche, but it's basically a process of becoming. And really, life is just all about everybody is trying to, reach their potential. And so, I genuinely believe that everybody in this phase is trying to do. I think the only thing that makes us different is that we're probably just in different places in the journey. Maybe we're going in different directions, and that's okay. As long as we're all open to that and open to learning and open to learning from each other. So I just want to finish by saying thank you tonight for being part of my Boston.
Thank you, Anthony, for absolutely wonderful. I mean, I've got chemicals happening all over the place. But if we've got time, just a little mention to the next speaker.
On your story, get it started in the lunchroom. Is that something completely different story? Was it something you just like?
No,
that's you must have stood waiting for it.
Yeah, a bit both. That's me personally. Do you mean the one about the migrations?
But the last one that we've asked you.
Yes, it was a true story. Yeah. Yes, it was a true story. Yes, it had been shared with me by somebody. But the person, I can't remember if they actually were directed at that job, but it was pretty fast. It actually happened. More than once. But yeah, obviously, yeah, and you gotta correct. You gotta do it quickly and figure out. You gotta practice them so you're comfortable telling them that you're actually basically not knowing as well. Got at the end of the day, we've got that. You can either compromise or not. Got to know where that line is. So it's all very clear.
is there an incremental way in getting people used to design, as opposed to just giving you one design off the get-go and then having those bottlenecks?
Yeah, you can.
And is there an instructive way of saying this is how you do this, this is how you do this?
So I guess I think the answer is yes. In the situation that I was describing, we actually made a conscious decision not to. So without getting into lots of detail, we've been through a lot of debate about bit of an analogy, but the whole plastic versus plastic versus all do. So basically everything almost looks like what it looked like and incrementally lifted. So do that first and then sort of deliver the whole. We kind of got in the stage where we go, well, we could do that, but actually we'd probably lose an opportunity to make statements. And actually we'll lose an opportunity to have something to go out to the marketplace where it's actually celebrate itself. And we'll probably also, this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but one of the things that we learned was that we have done before is, or I've been through it, is we sometimes you also, in doing that, can make some really bad technology decisions that lock you into a corner. And so without realizing it, because we weren't having the right conversations after so much to design, we basically painted ourselves into and constrained the technology so badly that it became so customized that we actually couldn't service it and change it after saying, all right. So you can, just have to be aware of the trade-offs.
Well, it sounds like you got to design the end game and then look at the incremental ways of how to get it.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that even, we can talk about this a lot more. Is that once it's out there and once you're actually in the wild anyway, stuff changes. Because you're going to get new scope that you didn't necessarily think you were ever going to have because there's a need or demand for that. So what you think is going to happen, but actually it's more about whichever direction to go with. You basically have to be able to absorb the change and deal with it as it needs.
Gotcha.
So you could, we just chose not to.
One more person. Yeah, well, let's thank Anthony. That's absolutely. Let's think again. Just set up. I really enjoyed those stories. But I would say that Comic Sans, in the defense of Comic Sans, not the red band. But there is a you probably know the story of. Years ago, I worked in physics, and recently. I remember the guys in Switzerland who run the big accelerator where they were going to find the God particles, the Higgs boson, all that sort of stuff. Big deal. There were people trying to stop it in court case it turned the Earth into a black hole and all this. But anyway, when they found it, the press release famously came out with Comic Sans, which I think resurrected the font for a whole new generation of scientists. The God particle was announced in Comic Sans. Okay, so our next speaker, Ben Marr, will speak to us on conversion design. Really interesting background, Ben. I understand he's recently just launched a startup. I'll let him describe his journey with the next speech now on conversion design. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to the organisers and sponsors and to James Cooper for inviting me. I've had an interesting journey of the last 5-6 years. I got married and got driven to the wedding by a friend of my mum's. And he said, I'm a director at a web design company, you should come and work for us. So after the wedding, I gave him a call, and they gave me a job. Now, they had an approach which I was really open to. It was a little cookie cutter at the time. In that they kind of generally produced the same looking designs, but they were hardcore about the rules of getting conversions to the work that they did. Now, I grew up in an artistic family. My father was an artist, my brother's an artist, my older brother is an animator. And art was about truth. So it wasn't any kind of art and farting or obscuring of the truth through your own ego. It was about what can we express through art that expresses the truth of what we see in the world. So when I ran into these guys, there was a truth behind the art in that you could produce this art, then you get the numbers back, and it would tell you whether you actually were successful or not. So after about 6 months of learning from them and essentially playing by their rules, I asked to break the rules. And luckily enough for me, they were really open to that. So we started producing work outside of their template style, started winning awards, and started having conversion increases around the 200, 300, 400% mark. We even had one where it was 900% increase. The incumbent side was awful. So, you know, but I learned a lot, and certainly progressing once I left there, I kind of merged it into my own approach, and it's met with nothing but success for the last 5 years. So I think it's worth getting across to you guys part of what that journey has been. I was at Combank for the last 2 years, placed by James Cooper, as a UX and visual designer, as a hybrid. I left those guys a few months ago and have started my own startup. We have funding. It's in the childcare space. We'll release in January. And maybe I'll come back around then if this goes well and talk about that, because this, in terms of example here, that I'll show you, it's pretty basic design, but it's a good expression of conversion design to kind of say, hey, look, this is basic design, but it did really well. In terms of the startup, I think it's going to be an incredible expression of conversion design on many different levels. So hopefully I can come back and talk about that. So basically, this is just keeping it really high level so we don't get bogged down in detail. There's some very basic rules really, and they're all around contrast. So kind of basic example there. Going through them, essentially in terms of the left, there's a use and read text or perceive a shape. So when you put text on the dark background, the eye tends to take in shape of the colour before it takes in the text. It's not the end of the world if that's what your design needs to do, but it's worth knowing about how the eye takes in that type of content. In terms of sentence case and capital, it's the same kind of thing. The ebb and flow of the iris when it encounters sentence case text allows us to focus and really kind of comprehend the information. When you produce headlines in capitalization, there's a block that's created by the capitalization. And again, the eye tends to pick up the shape or it picks up the actual text of that shape. And then in terms of contrast, strong contrast, yeah, very important. Vague contrast, you can have an incomplete input whether the user knows it or not. So these rules, and there's a bunch of others as well, but they all basically focus on how we perceive reality, and we do that through our eyes when it comes to digital. So for the majority, we have peripheral vision, and we really don't take in any clear information from that. It's all abstract. With powerful veil vision, it's essentially our targeting mechanism where we notice that says that over there and we target in and focus, which is our veil vision in the center, and it's very small. And essentially in practice, it's kind of like the size of a 20-cent piece. So when you take in a large amount of information, your eyes and your brain are basically capturing a whole bunch of different pictures and putting them together. So conversion design recognizes these limitations and how they affect how we piece content together. So ultimately with conversion design, what we want to produce is high concept content. So that it isn't taken in a vague way. It's very directed. There's clear paths that we've defined beforehand and have strategized. And they're all designed to basically create that picture that allows someone to take the snap and understand what we're talking about. We deliver the message that we want delivered, it inspires users, and they act. And this is really the crux of it. So if we get outside all the rules and all this other stuff, conversion is essentially an emotional response to a good story. So once you get that high concept content strategically delivered, what we want to happen is for the eye to see it, the brain to process it, and for the emotions to say, I agree with you, that makes sense, I'm with you. So basically that is as a broad concept. These are just two techniques for getting to the truth of a story so that you have that compelling idea. So before Combank, I had this in a very vague expression, and trying to get traction in a large organization just wasn't really happening. So I put it in a learning canvas, and all of a sudden it seemed to have legitimacy and everyone died. So this can be what you want, but it works. So essentially, you've got products, the unique selling position, defining the offer, space for your personas, content strategy, and conversion strategy. So under products, these are kind of vague. They can vary per project or product. But you basically want to find a hierarchy for the business value, and it can provide spatial guidance for the design. Essentially, this is more important to the business or the customer, so it's going to have prominence here. This isn't as much, so it's going to be smaller down here. You can also define any product relationship between multiple products. USPs, what do you offer that your competitors don't? Why should the user spend their time with your content? The offer, this is the most important thing. And Anthony kind of touched on it a bit with, the landing page ideas. Essentially, we've got all this other stuff, but what are we actually selling? So there's, in terms of UX, we want to look at the effort to engage. So it's like once the design's there and start to engage with it, how much effort it takes for the user. But that's a physical idea. There's a mental counterpart, which is the effort to understand the offer. We'll go into that a bit later, but it essentially comes down to, if you don't know what the offer is yourself, how can you sell it? Personas, it's basically looking at the relationship to the products above, and you want to apply the same type of hierarchy for business value and project part of the journey as it relates to them in their relation to the product. Content strategy, define the exact outcomes you want. It's not always to convert. There may be kind of multiple pages in a section, and it's how the user may navigate that section to eventually convert rather than just a particular page. You want to list 4 takeouts and primary goals for the business. Conversion strategy, we really want to define the relative complexity. Some products, some offerings are really simple, and you can just dive straight into it. Some are really complex, and you really need to work out a very clear strategy of, potentially multiple paths, but I'm not going to really show it here, but you'll map out to the nth degree. So on a complex product offer, you may have something that looks like a spider's web. On something that's simple, it may just be a couple of pages linked together. So that's one in action for merchant services FPOS that we did. About 10 stakeholders. That's 2 hours worth of effort there. And it's essentially drawing all the knowledge out of all of the stakeholders to really kind of define what we need to do and have that as our plan of attack. So leaving that aside for the moment, this is the other kind of technique that I developed at Combank. So what I've found over time, it's back to the idea of truth again, is that for the designers here, we've all had those moments where we're trying to get the story right in the design, the look, the feel, everything. But it's us struggling, staring at a screen, and feeling like we're not getting it. So I've found over time, when you elevate the importance of story, that using other people to create that story is much easier than 1 or 2 people staring at the screen. So we used the canvas before as our plan, but we then use this idea of content strategy cards. So it's basically scissors and paper. bunch of Sharpies. And the idea is to mimic the design patterns you may have in your site. Then with Sharpies, get ideas down. Don't worry about the big picture, just say what you need. Say and use a defined pattern. We then construct the page, stick pieces up, move them around, put it down, get tactile. This is an example of it in action. And I'll hook up the volume. But it doesn't really matter. What's interesting here, the people that you're looking at, is that there's 3 designers in the room. There's basically 20 people. And there's product people, there's marketing people, there's tech people. They're all split up amongst the different teams, and they're all designing. And this isn't busy work. This is what we use afterwards to actually produce the design. It's short. We're referring all this back to the canvas that we've done. So then, at the end of that, we basically take photos of what we've actually produced, and that becomes the design. That then goes into the normal design process of copywriter, the designer, a proper wireframe, but essentially the core story that we have has been drawn out of all of the knowledge in the room, not just one tool. So the example here is a project I worked on at Combank and applied these principles to. It was the first chance to apply these principles. It was the business transaction account product. Now, they gave me, free rein to kind of do what I thought needed to be done. But essentially, they believed that they'd have a result after 3 months. That the amount of data coming through the amount of visitors coming through to the page and the data that we'd have wasn't enough. We needed 3 months to get enough data to declare it a winner over the incumbent. Well, they believed they had a winner in a week and a half. We let that run out for 3 weeks, but there was an immediate 55% increase in conversions. After 6 months, the ultimate conversion rate is 7%. The industry standard is 1%. And we had a 400% increase in app submits. So the incumbent was delivering 50 application submits, people signing up to the business transaction account, 50 a week. After 6 months, we had over 200 every single week. So essentially, the strategy that came about from a learning canvas and that content strategy card session was essentially 3 personas, novice to expert. This page needs to deal with all 3 of them simultaneously. And we defined that if we could make our case in the first panel above the fold, we take care of our expert. He knows what he's doing. He's probably already got a business transaction account. And we don't want to bore him with stuff that he already knows. So essentially, the offer that we defined from this roundtable experience was that it's a fairly average product. There's nothing that's really that great about it, apart from the fact that you need one to run a business, kind of, because you actually don't, because you can open a second personal account and pay nothing. But the thing is, if you are serious about business, you should have business transactions, because it divides your personal life from your business life. It's much easier to manage, you'll save time, but you've got to get that across to people. It's not easy to get that across. It's also $10 a month. It's $5 more expensive than Westpac, I think. Probably something like that. And so there's really not a lot to sell about it. So what we defined from it was the truth. And the truth was that the 40-person team outside of this landing page that had produced the onboarding and the ID verification live with ASIC and everything else that allowed someone to sign up for a transaction account online was a world first. It took at least a year before I got there for them to produce that. It was really incredible stuff. And that was worth talking about as a selling point. So can't really see it there, but the headline was open your business transaction account in 10 minutes or less. So that's the benefit to the user. It's a true statement. And essentially the offer became, in the background of the subtext, was you don't have to drive to the bank, you don't have to find parking, you don't have to register the parking ticket, you don't have to wait in line, you don't have to do all of these things, you can do it here in 10 minutes. So then essentially beyond that, the CPA strategy was one URL on the page. Combank have a habit, and there's a lot of legacy pages that just have lots of links on the page. So if you actually map that out, like we did, you start to see this spider's web of a journey where people get lost over here because they click this, click that, and then don't know what to do and they close the page. So this was essentially, and this was right for this, it's not right for everything else, but essentially on here, you land on this page, there's 3 blue buttons that correlate to the 3 personas as they either engage, read a bit more, engage, read the rest, engage. And you either do that or go back or use the main nav. Everything else is just in terms of transparency about product, prices, sales benefits, third-party recommendations, and other kind of core element of conversion design. And yeah, it's essentially, there's no waste of space on the page. Everything is strategized, and it essentially worked like gangbusters. We went on to the next project, which had 390% increase in conversion. Yeah, and I think we've really proved the case. And that's.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions from the floor?
Said it all.
Mention about is there like a twist there?
Yeah, so I mean, generally, every organisation has their list of personas that are worked out from research and do represent real people. But we can, essentially, it's CBA per department. You can kind of say there's probably 3 personas per product. In this case, there are, business people who've done this before. There's people who are just starting out and really don't know anything at all. And you can, from the personas, there's for someone who's starting out, anxiety is the primary emotion. For someone who has been in business for years, primary emotion is impatience, just get out of my way, let me do it. So when you have to produce these pages that have to work, how do you deal with multiple use cases? And I think for a lot of things it can seem daunting at the time, but I found that these techniques really kind of just get to the heart of what we need to say, recognize issues, find solutions for those issues, produce content and ideas together, and then it goes off to the specialists like Excel, copywriter, just to kind of produce it. But look, I'd say for that one as well, and the next project I worked on, partly because of budget, and partly because I didn't need it either. We didn't do any user testing. It went straight live and blew the incumbent out of the water. So there's what I believe within this is that using these techniques for some projects, you can get to a point where you don't necessarily need user testing to take it live. You can then start iterating once it's live. But there's enough to kind of say of the list of rules of conversion design, this ticks all the boxes, so I know it's going to be successful. And look, I'd say as well, what's been interesting, what Anthony said too about the journey, it's absolutely true. what I found happening over the years and why I'm happy to talk about this is starting with the guys I started with 5 years ago. You start working on a design, goes live, the conversion guy comes over, tells you it's successful or not. When it's not, you learn as much as when it is. But in the moment, you're just rushing to produce the work, trying to do the best job for the client. What I noticed when I landed at Combank was that all of that effort and that putting something to market, seeing the results, validating, and so on, and also learning about how you take in information, how you process information, how you respond to information. I've found that my eyes and my brain have been trained in the sense that I can now look at a design. I kind of feel my eyes snapping like a camera, piecing together the content as to whether it's a coherent story or not. And so it's nothing that you can really kind of define right now, but once you get into this process of producing for the live environment and getting the results back, and a lot of places don't actually have the apparatus in place to do that for you. Even CDA, it was only because I was proactive that I was hassling the conversion, sales and conversion team all the time, that I get the results. You really have to go after them. But you can find out over time that your physiology itself will change, and you'll be in a position where I can pretty much see if there's a good story. And I'd say to take out anyone who's a designer outside of rules, outside of all this stuff, is look at what you've produced. Is it a good story? If it's not, it's probably back to the drawing board. And that's the easiest way to define whether you've got something that someone's going to engage with. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll be able to tell whether it's a good story.
With your you're obviously embedded the practice of this thing there while you're there, in the sense of learning. You know, if it's still using some of the concepts.
Yeah. It's really cool. They resources at CBA, it's all very tightly controlled. So the fact that we even did this, before we did this, they're telling me, you need to pull together 3 departments to do this, and you won't do it because of the politics. Well, we did it, and those teams all worked really well together. So when the next project came along, we were trying to do it again. And what's really cool is the content strategy part. It's really easy to work with. And I've had content producers there who don't have a UX resource take that idea and go and run an inception themselves and come out with a wireframe that makes sense from a content strategy point of view. And the footage you saw was, I wasn't really giving anything away, but was an inception that took place before I left, that I led. The GM of Combank said it was the best inception that's ever been run. So then I know of 2 instances of departments taking that idea and running with it. And it's really fun. Like, you go in having absolutely no idea what you're going to come out with. But it's basically the 10 of us could get some scissors and paper and some pens and have a goal. And by the end of it, we would have produced a design that we all feel engaged with and works. You've got 10 people looking at it and saying, that's a cool story.
Probably good process for prototyping.
It really is, yeah. So it's I'm happy that we came up with that. It gets to the truth and it's fun at the same time.
Very good. So thank you, Ben. Now, before we go to our last speaker, I'm going to hear from Katya. To tell us about interesting opportunities. Who here has heard of HASO lately? Who has heard of distilling? Hey, yeah, you all know who this is. Over to you, just to introduce the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. So everybody's here for design thinking, so I'm sure that after this great talk, you're thinking, how can I do design thinking straight away? I really, really want an opportunity. Well, my crew run D-School, once a month. And we're going to be doing one on the 1st of October. We've got about 9 tickets left. $35 includes beer. I've got a discount code for you guys, DTC. I have put the link on the comments of this meetup. I've also tweeted it for you. My handle is Lucky Cat with a K. Yes, so I do know about my own Twitter handle. So D-School, basically, we take you through the design thinking process in 90 minutes. And you end up with something at the end that you've prototyped and usability tested with your stakeholder on the day. So it's at Fishburners in the Ideas Basement. You're more than welcome to come along. But if you miss out this time, then we're running it again on the 1st of November and so on and so on. And what I'll do is I'll post the Eventbrite link on your meetup.
Yeah.
Yep. So every time we run it, you can come and design think. Awesome. Thank you.
Our last big thing, just get to set up. What's interesting for me about tonight, so far, two absolutely excellent talks, but the latest story is a big element of it. And I think it's about some of the visual elements of the show. And if you think about the history of science, I find it interesting. I mean, I'm old enough and I grew up with the first level, so we committed with some design translations. And what I think is very interesting about this time, from the first speaker, Anthony, about great topic of designers. There's an old book by Michael Quinn called Meaning as a Message, and the essential idea behind that is that throughout time, and particularly in times when media is prominent, the form of the media shapes the story to some extent. What I'm trying to say, it's a simple concept, is that if you get a new medium like a smartphone, a new medium to communicate a message, the kinds of messages and stories that are effective in that medium is in a sense a function of that. You can tell a certain kind of story well, and other kinds of stories not so well. And so therefore, every time we get a new design innovation, what we find is people developing new ways to tell stories. And there are formulas to design those stories and design scripts. And I well remember when I was in school and we did movie making from an actual movie maker who taught us some of the tricks of making movies and how when you make a movie, you actually violate logic in terms of how you take shots to fit the psychologist's perceptions. So you consciously do things when you set up scenes that actually involve camera angles and things that don't actually make sense. Also stories, interaction stories and design. Now the reason I'm sharing that with you is our last speaker is going to talk about gamification, which is in fact a whole new level of interaction design about a story where the user themselves is part of that story. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Lie Ming Tang to talk about gamification.
So I'm aware that it's really late, so my talk is going to be. All right. So what I wanted to, the reason I want to talk about gamification, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the buzzword gamification and gamify. So what I wanted to do is actually give you a bit of a more theoretical background, a more insight into how the underneath underneath all the hype and all these things, how it actually works, and to give you some examples, good examples, anything. Just to give you a bit of an intro, and I'm sure a lot of your marketing people out there probably knows a lot about this, but I think it's good to have that foundational insight. And hopefully, once you understand how it works, then you can go out and learn how to actually apply gamification to work through. Right? So first thing, let's play a game, right? Like we're doing a gamification talk, so let's play a game. So this is, you've already seen. The idea is you have to form a team. I hope some of you have formed a team. And you have a team name. Come up with a team name. And you've already seen 2 talks. Hopefully, you're going to be able to answer some of the questions that we post to you. And you're going to win a prize. So what do you win, right? What do you win? I mean, there's no game if there's no winning. So first thing first is sense of achievement, guys. That's probably the most important thing, right? I mean, that sense that you answer the question you want. right? Now, if that's not enough, there's a price. I think I talked to Lucas. There might be a price. There might not. There may not be a price. Yeah. So let's go back to here. Sense of achievement, right? So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about definition of gamification, theories behind it, and give you examples. So first, what is a game? Right? Games, everyone plays games before. They have rules. You have a goal in the game. You have challenges. So you are challenged, and you interact in the game. Now, what you might not have thought about is games that have actually been around forever, right? Military, armies in the past, and thousands of years ago, have used games to practice and to train their soldiers. People have been playing games for thousands of years. It's usually fun, unless you're losing, right? And it can be addictive, right? People become addicted to games. So let's talk about definition of gamification. So this is more of an academic, in academic, a lot of people argue about what is gamification. In academia, actually, people kind of frown upon the term gamification. They see it more as an extension of game design, right? Applying games. An actual definition of gamification is actually applying game elements and game thinking in non-game context. Okay, so the way I see it is, on the one hand, you have games that are designed to teach and to train people. On the other hand, you have a few game elements that's tacked on to certain activity, and it's kind of enjoyable. So to me, it's more the degree in which it is a game, and it's more of a terminology thing. But I hope that this description kind of demystifies the term. To me, it's not that important in terms of what exactly can be classified as a gamification, or exactly over a serious game, which is basically a game but have a serious outcome, like a function or a training. Okay, so is Monopoly, right? So in one late night, I started looking at Wikipedia pages, messing them up, and I started looking at monopolies. And interesting fact is, what Wikipedia claims is that the origin of Monopoly is called this landlord's game, which was developed by this lady in 1903. And the purpose of it was to teach people the problems of having a monopoly, right? So in fact, Monopoly started as a training and teaching tool instead of a game, which it later became, and it was very popular. So yeah, when I asked you, is Monopoly a game or not? To me, it's kind of blurred. It's training as well as a game, right? So how does gamification work, right? So so without, we have to talk about what really motivates us. And you have the Maslow's pyramid of need. So this is pretty famous guy, and a lot of people probably know about this. And he breaks down how people are motivated. And at the top, you have self-actualization, you have esteem needs. So more how you feel and how you think of yourself. Now, there's a theory that a lot of gamification people profile, which is called the self-determination theory. And in part of that is the very important concept is intrinsic motivation. And as part of the intrinsic motivation, we're talking about, so when we talk about intrinsic motivation, what really motivates people other than money or specific things that they get. So, what the researchers found is autonomy. Autonomy, we're talking about autonomy, we're talking about people like to choose for themselves. So if your boss came to you and say, you have to do this, and instead your boss came to you and say, here's an option of 3 projects you can work on. Choose one. Now, those are 2 very different, you will see those 2 options very differently. One, you feel like you've been forced to do something. The other is you have a choice. So people like to have a choice. Second is competence. So you want to be challenged in what you're doing. So if your boss came to you and say, all you have to do is add up, here's a spreadsheet and just add the numbers up. right? You're not going to feel challenged, and you're going to feel really bored after that. Right? People want to be challenged. And the third one is related. So how the feeling of how we feel, how we relate to people that we know, like how we relate to our colleagues, how we relate to our friends and family. So those three are very important intrinsic motivations that when you design games, you have to consider. You have to consider. Obviously, we can talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So a lot of the gamification design is really talking about using the extrinsic motivations and making them internal to make badges and levels, make it feel like something that, to turn how you view those badges and levels into intrinsic motivation. Right? So psychology theories using games. So this is just a small example list of what is being used in the game. So you've probably seen operant conditioning. You click a button, right? You click buttons in certain ways and you get some rewards or whatever. Commitment and consistency. So people have a tendency to want to be consistent, right? And I'll talk a little bit, give you some reciprocity. So that's where people, when you're giving something by someone, you feel the need to give something back. A lot of people have that feeling. Reward schedules, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Loss aversion and endowment. So this is where, when you have something, let's say you're in Second Life and you build this big house, right? What happens tomorrow? That house being demolished by someone. You're gonna feel kind of lost, and you spend a lot of time. You feel like you own that, right? So that's what the loss aversion. Endowed progress effect. So you want to have. If you achieve a certain level, you feel like, yeah, you know what? I'm pretty good. I want to keep playing with it. So there's a few other theories. I won't have time to go through it, but there's a whole bunch of psychological theories that games and the way that they are designed, the mechanics that they use to actually using games to encourage people to play. And these are the things that I want to look for. Okay, so commitment and consistency. I'll just give you a few examples. So we have a powerful need for consistency. Now you see all these different types of couple of games, right? You have, like, for example, Candy Crush. You have a really powerful need to, make those three things connect together, and that's what they use, right? Starbucks, or coffee, reward cards. You see reward, and they always do the first one. You already got one. You gotta finish the other three or other 9, right, to get your free one. So they all use psychological science. In that progress, we talk about that. You feel more committed since you have some progress. That's why a lot of games, say you're level 1, level 2, level 3, they make you feel like you progressed and you don't want to lose that progression when you come back. Okay, reward schedule. One of the most powerful reward schedules, as examples that you will see, is slot machines. Slot machines use random reward schedule. Okay, so when you pressing that button, you don't know next click is going to make you, a few $100s or no dollars. This is actually very, very rewarding and motivating to people, very addictive. Okay? And slot machine is basically based on that. Millions of people are addicted to that. And that's the power of random reward schedule. There's a whole different type of reward schedule. There's fixed, where you know that something's going to happen if you do come back on a certain day. Candy Crush, there's a lot of that. So what do good gamifications do, right? So in my mind, good gamification changed the way that we perceive things. So I give two really good examples. One is for the speed camera lottery. What happens is people who go under the speed limit will be automatically entered into a lottery to win the prizes, to win the money for people who went over. Right? So if you got a speeding ticket, it automatically goes into a pool where people who goes under can win. Right? So it actually flipped that whole punishment thing with speed cameras upside down, right? To make you think of it as a reward. And it's hugely successful. Right? It reduces speed by 20% through that school zone. And this happened in Sweden. Another example is the NRL managers game. Right? So if you look at the way the game works is you play the manager and you organize teams and you buy players and you kind of use the stats and you kind of win, you become a good manager or not. Now, if you look at the game itself, it's a whole bunch of spreadsheets and stats and stuff, right? This is what you do at work, you know, like this is really boring stuff. If you're not really into NRL, if you don't want to be an NRL manager, it's really, really boring, right? Basically, you're working, right? I mean, some of the stuff, like you look at injuries reports and stuff, you know, like, so, I mean, what they successfully did is change the way you perceive certain tasks into something that's really interesting. And that's what gamification is. Okay, personalization. Another thing you could do with gamification or creating games is personalize the way that you interact with the customer or the user, right? You have levels to know how advanced or how not advanced they are. You have the way, you know the type of player they are, potentially, depending on what value you get. And you can elicit preferences in terms of what they want. So now, finally, are you motivated by badges? So the question is, you know, when you play some game, suddenly they give you badge A, badge B, badge C. You are in level 100. Is it really motivating to you or not? Now, good gamification tries to make these badges meaningful to you. So they convert what badges means to something that's really meaningful to you. So let's say the badges, I'm really good at calculus, you know, or I'm really good at physics. That's really meaningful to you, right? But if it says I'm a really great, I don't know, like organizer in, you know, something that you don't really care about, it's meaningless to you. So when you're designing good gamification, it has to mean something to you. They have to change the mindset of what that is. So what works, what doesn't? It really depends, right? To me, I've seen a lot of examples that works and a lot of examples that don't work. And, you know, to my mind, good gamification is enough. Like you have to, you know, there's so many factors. It's almost like UX design. There's so many factors that affects whether your game or your application is good or not. So I'll give you some, you know, key things to consider. You have to design for your target player or user, and it's very similar, like very close to UX. You know, it has to be motivating to that user. Obviously, look at the autonomy, competence, and relatedness. How your rewards associate with those. It has to be meaningful. Design for flow. So I didn't talk too much about that, but flow is basically you have to make sure the game is not too challenging, so difficult that people just give up. But it can't be too easy because they have to be challenged, right? And monitor and adjust. So a lot of gamification practitioners say you basically have to. You're probably not going to get it right the first time. So you got to keep monitor the game, how the players react, and then adjust your rewards, adjust the way that you present your games, so that you know they are achieving their flow and they like the game. I put an example of Flappy Bird. Right, Flappy Bird is a very, very successful game. It's very simple. You know, like all you do is one finger. But why is it successful? It's because the designer actually achieved flow really well. If he made it so simple that you could just breeze through the game, no one would play. But if you made it too easy, if you made it too difficult, people wouldn't play. He got it just right. And although a lot of people say he built the game in a day, he didn't get it to that level. He designed it, he played it himself, he made sure that it's just right. So it's not that easy. And I'll give you some example of success stories, and I'm almost done. So there's an example called Fold It. It's a serious game. Now what happens is it's a game designed by scientists for everyday people to play this game. But once you play the game, you actually create a scientific result. And they were able to solve a problem that couldn't be solved by scientists in 15 years. They solved it in 10 days. Right? This is the power of gamification. Airline and retail loyalty reward programs. I would love to be, in the first class lounge or whatever. But if you think about it, in terms of the cost to the airline, is very, very low. But people love and kind of really buy into those programs. I need to get my reward points. I have to redeem these. Stack Exchange is a IT software kind of website that you're rewarded by coming, by asking questions of other people. You get to become really kind of highly rated programmer or highly rated expert. So people are motivated by that because, like if we go back to in terms of meaning, right? It's really meaningful. The expert of Stack Exchange on C++, right? Or UX. Nike Plus is a very useful, very successful example. CBA has two very successful examples. Investorville and Coinland. Like Coinland is where they, kind of get kids to invest and teach kids how to what money means and how to use investment. And it was very, very successful for CBA. So, to summarize, the gamification can be very successful, but you have to apply it in the right way. You have to understand your population, the people that you're designing for, and you have to be cognizant of all these different factors that affect your gamification. So I went a little bit overboard, unfortunately, but this is the end. So, go to the website, play the game, and I'm gonna run a draw at the end. So there's a website we're gonna run a draw and see who wins. All right. So I'm gonna leave this up.
Maybe to ask a question at the same time. People was trying to answer the question from Darren. I do have one myself, because you mentioned that academia with gamification, and sense I'm trying to recognize gamification. Game theory trying to assess what help people behave. Is it overlap?
Yeah, it's more it's almost more like snobbishness. That a lot of academics they research serious games or research games, so they don't consider gamification as a separate research area. They just consider it as the same area or apply it differently. It's not really the same as. Sorry, I've gone through all the concept very quickly.
Another question, can you give me examples where you might use gamification and make people think what is the product?
Yeah, there's you can apply gamification essentially to apply it to direct them into a behavior that you want. So if you want them to, let's say, to select a specific product, then you would design your rewards based on it, or your rewards in game design based on that. I mean, there's no specific, as far as I can tell, there's no specific way to do that. You just have to look at your audience, what will motivate them, and to design the gamification based on that. Right. So I mean, it's probably like a too broad a question to answer. It's not like there's a structured process to do that. You just have to design. I mean, the concept is really to design rewards so that people will motivate towards that objective.
Done research in terms of gamification because, as you mentioned, the idea of taking people through a particular experience, having them encounter what's called friction points, giving them a sense of meaning towards something, and eventually giving them a reward at the end. If I have to do that every time I buy coffee, do some dry cleaning, etc., it occurred to me that perhaps there might be a problem with it.
Yeah. So I think one way to answer that is when you're designing the gamification itself, you need to design it for different types of users or players. So if a player or a user has been using that gamification all the time, and they're always constantly coming back, there needs to be some meaning or reason why the gamification is needed, right? So for example, like what you want them to do, let's say buy coffee, let's say continue. So if they're already doing that, then there's no reason to apply any additional gamification to that. So the idea is that when a lot of the research says that if you do apply gamification and if you do apply reward, it needs to have meaning. So if you just doing, let's say, gamifying something and you're just giving them reward, it has no meaning after. And I'll give you an example of Stack Exchange. Stack Exchange is very good in that even though, let's say you take away all the gamification itself, the actual reason for using Stack Exchange is still there. It's a very good resource for people to get technical information about programming, about specific technology. So you have to have meaning in that what you're doing. Instead of so what you're saying is you're right, because people will get bored and like they say this is useless and I'm still getting these notifications for no reason at all. Right? But if there is a meaning, then things will work. So if they do get a notification for something, that hey, you know what, you achieved 10,000 you reached the moon. So I do a lot of examples with Fitbit. So they have badges where you lifetime achievement. So if you made it, if you actually ran to the moon, they'll give you a badge, right? So this actually have meaning to some people. And they say, oh yeah, that's cool. We have actually done a physical activity to reach the moon. Yeah.
Just when you mentioned Fitbit, what a lot of fitness trackers is initially high engagement, but it tends to fall off the island of abandonment at about 6 to 8 weeks mark. Are there any tips to further use gamification for longer term engagement? They do all the classic ones, and it seems to work just for short time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a research by in the US, this company, Charterhouse, and they say most people who initially own the Fitbit stop using, like more than 50% will start using it after 6 months. And you're right. I've done some research that suggest corroborate that as well. But yeah, so what works is still very unclear. So I think a lot of commercial companies like Fitbit, they don't want to advertise this information. But academic, the growing consensus is that it's not enough to just give you a Fitbit. This person needs to want to change their lifestyle. They need to have some reason to actually monitor themselves. And I think gamification can do it, but I haven't seen any successful gamification yet. There's examples like Gym Pact who tries it. So basically you have a pact with other people, and if you don't go to the gym, 8 times, 7 times a week, you're gonna lose money to other people. But it seems that didn't work very well long term. It works in the short term, and initially when it started, it was quite successful, but now it's kind of like not as successful. So yeah, I haven't seen any very successful ones for a population level. There are examples that are very successful. Help One, all the Red Cross ones, those are gamification. They're very, very good. But we haven't seen any one example of gamification that works for a population.
So how do we determine that?
So I'm gonna just run I'm going to run a draw.
Good. We're going to have 2 draws.
Okay.
Business case.
Actually, can I do it here? Is there any internet on the? I'll just show people what they run.
Big fishbowl.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, very good.
Maybe to just something checking there is
That's why that's so hard. It's the whole thing. Later, it's later over it, you know. Like it's. You want to put your business card in? Voting the points for your innovation.
It's not rigged. That wasn't rigged.
You had to ask, so you need to point out if people do game the system, I just did the video.
I can run it again.
You know what's wrong, so it's-
Oh.
We'll take that. I'll take that. Take that upstairs.
Let's thank all our speakers just before we have to draw. Do you remember when's the next event?
Actually, that's a good point. So we actually changed, we're scheduling our events on the second Thursday of every month, but next month we're going to change it. So we're going to line up with Startup Week Sydney's. And our next event's actually going to be in Seabed Innovation Hall. So organise that premises, and we're going to publish that on the community.
27th of October.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you.
So a month is important.
So please all be there.
Thanks, good.
Our sponsors, Louise and Sam, do you want to come up here to make the presentation? Whoever is our lovely winner. Thank you. Thank you to Charterhouse. Please give Charterhouse. Now, it's business. So do make presentation. Who's going to choose?
Yeah, okay.
Shide. Eric. Hello, mate.
Thank you. Thanks, Charterhouse.